This is Dr. John McDougall joining you this afternoon as I have the privilege to do every Saturday afternoon from 12 to 2. Today, I have a very special guest, and if I seem to be a bit awkward during this interview, there's a very good reason for it, and that is that I'm talking to, this afternoon, one of the greats in the radio business. And so, I may not measure up to the experience that this man has and to the type of radio personality he is. If you have children, teenagers especially, you will know my guest very well. If you don't have teenagers and you watch morning cartoons or you are familiar with the voices on commercials, then you'll recognize my guest. And if you are involved in ecology, vegetarian diets, human interest, betterment of the planet, then you're going to know my guest. I have the great privilege this afternoon of talking to Kasem of America's Top 40. Casey, welcome to the show.
Well, Dr. McDougall, thank you very much. I appreciate that terrific intro. Can I correct you on one small thing?
Okay.
American Top 40 I did for 18 years.
Oh, okay.
And then I moved from the ABC radio network to the Westwood One radio network, and now I do essentially the same kind of countdown, but it's called the Casey's Top 40.
That's good. I've got that written right here. Casey's Top 40 now. That's great. Just because some of the folks in my listening audience may not be familiar because they don't have the kids or they don't listen to anything but talk radio, which of course is the best radio. Mm-hmm. Let's tell them a little bit about what you do. You have a national radio show that plays top 40 music.
Right. What I did along with some associates back in 1970 is to create a top 40 countdown that hadn't been done before in the United States on a national or international basis. And it launched, the show was launched July 4th, 1970, and it was called American Top 40. And then in 1980, I launched a show, along with some associates, called America's Top 10, a television show. Now, American Top 40 is still on the air with another host, because I left the network and went to Westwood One, and now there's a Casey's Top 40 with Casey Kasem, and a television show that's in its 11th year called America's Top 10 with Casey Kasem. So I'm sort of very much involved with counting hits down from 40 to number one or from 10 to number one, and that's what I've been doing along with the other things that you had mentioned earlier.
Is that what you enjoy doing most, is radio?
I really do enjoy radio, and I think one of the reasons is I, in a way, have much control over what it is that I say and the way I say it. In television, very often, you do your thing, but then, of course, the lighting man does his, and the makeup person does hers or his. The director and the producer and a lot of people have a lot of input, including the editor. But in radio, it's almost a one-man show. Not to take anything away from the most important part of my show, and I think that's the writing. And I have, very fortunately, 2 or 3 brilliant writers.
So when you go on the air and you play the top 40, you have a lot of this scripted and it's not just spontaneous?
Every bit of it is scripted. From day number one, it was scripted. As a matter of fact, I learned to write a radio show in the Bay Area. Back in 1961, when I went to work in Oakland, California at KEWB, that was the call letters back then, I didn't realize that I would have to write a radio show and hand it to my engineer, who would have to get wild tracks for me. That was little voice cutouts that were on disc and on cassette, on reel-to-reel tape, etc. And the program director of the network, there were 3 stations, and he was centered in Los Angeles, told me, a legendary broadcaster, by the way, and he told me, he says, Casey, you're going to write your show. I said, what does that mean? He says, his name was Chuck Blower. He says, that means that you will turn a script in before you go on the air every night. I said, a 3 or 4 hour script every night? He says, that's right, or otherwise the engineer will not be able to give you the soundtracks that you need, the funny voices that you have on disc, etc., because that's not the way we do things here. Well, rather than say I quit and go across the street and work in San Francisco, I said, let's try it. And that's when I started writing a radio show. It was a comedy show at first, and then I was told not to do comedy anymore about 1.5 years later. And I said, what do I do? And he says, well, my general manager at that time, John McCrae, said, why don't you do what other disc jockeys do, talk about the records and the music and the musicians, etc. And I didn't know anything about them. And that night, 3 hours later, I figured I would last about an hour and a half doing time and temperature and introducing the artists and not really doing anything creative. As I walked in the door of the studio, and this is the truth 100%, there was a big trash barrel that the Farley McCluth, the maintenance man, had left wedged in the door as he was cleaning up the studio. And on top of all of this newspaper copy from the wire services, looking me right in the face, about a 4-foot-high barrel, was a magazine called Who's Who in Pop Music 1962. And I picked it up and looked at all the thumbnail sketches and some of the statistics that were in the magazine, and I was on my way to doing what I do today, and that's doing the teaser and the bio, delivering human interest stories and super facts on the stars and the musicians, and that's what I've been doing now for about 21 years.
And you're very good at it. I have to tell you, my 3 kids, which range from 8 to 16, you're a big hit with them. In fact, they consider, and I have to tell you this, they consider that set of records that you sent them one of their greatest treasures.
Well, I'm going to have to send them another one.
Well,
Thank you.
They would love it very much. And so, and I'm sure you're a big hit with a lot of the young adults, kids, and young at heart across the country. But you are also, in fact, the way that I really got to know about you was not because of the top 40, I guess because my kids weren't at that age at that time, and I wasn't listening to much music. But I got to know you because you're quite a rebel as far as certain social issues. And I don't mean just issues concerning food, which we're going to talk a lot about this hour, but there are a lot of social issues that you've become involved in, as I understand.
You're right, and I like the word rebel, by the way.
Good.
I think that anytime I can do progressive things and shake up part of America that perhaps needs a reminder that there's a lot to be done here in this country to make things better for people who aren't as fortunate as I am. And some of the things that I do, I think are very important, much more important than the radio show or the television show that I do or anything else that I do. And I think right at the top of the list is the basic thing. And of course, the basic thing is to hopefully stop people from killing anything, and to begin with, to create a nonviolent diet for themselves, because a nonviolent world has roots in a nonviolent diet. And I don't know who said that first, but there's so much truth in it. And then maybe we can think about solving our problems without violent wars, and to solve our problems diplomatically.
Well, this type of nature that you have, I mean, did this somehow come out of your upbringing?
I've always had a strong belief in a God or the first cause, or whatever you may call it. My parents, my mother in particular, would always say the words in Arabic, inshallah, which means if it's God's will. And I was brought up with a strong sense of something that was bigger than anything, and sort of a guide, a conscience. And so when I was about 15 years old in Michigan, and it was the end of the war, I remember going to a slaughterhouse where I saw one steer slaughtered before my eyes. And it was really, truly unbelievable what I'd seen. And I didn't eat meat for 3 to 6 months. But there's the saying that I'm sure you know, that George Bernard Shaw once said, and that's custom will reconcile people to any atrocity. And I customarily went along with everybody else and believed that it was wonderful to eat a juicy cheeseburger, and before long, watching television and listening to the radio, etc., and seeing the ads, I went back to eating meat. But I knew that one day I would stop. And in the 70s, probably 73 or 4, I remember one day saying to my wife, this is the last time I will ever eat a piece of meat, because there must be a relationship between eating meat and cancer. There just has to be. I don't know why. I'm not an expert. I've never read anything on it. I said, but I just know that there's a relationship. And not only that, I said, I've always wanted to be a vegetarian. I've always felt guilty about eating something that had to be murdered. And so I stopped. And from that day on, and it must have been 72 or 73, I don't remember the exact day, I hadn't eaten meat, fish, or poultry. And the only reason I went back to hard-shelled fish is because I let a nutritionist tell me that I needed more protein. Well, I went back to that for about a year, and then Vegetarian Times interviewed me in a cover story about, I guess, 5 years ago, maybe more, and maybe it was about 8 years ago, and they asked me, well, why are you eating hard-shell fish? I said, well, they don't have a nervous system, so I figured that's okay. And she said, are you sure? And I said, no. I said, I know what you're telling me, and I quit. I'm not going to eat anything from a fish as well. And so I quit totally. And then I was very fortunate as the co-chair of the Great American Meat Out, and that must have been 4 or 5 years ago, to talk to Dr. Clapper. And you know Michael Clapper,
sure.
the nutritionist. And he told me why I should become a vegan in about 3 hours before the March 20th day, when I would be doing interviews, etc., about the Great American Meat Out. And that's the day I became a vegan and have been ever since.
So 4 or 5 years you've had no animal products in your diet at all?
As far as I know. Now, I'm sure that I've gone into restaurants where I've ordered vegetables steamed, and they may have put some butter on it and I didn't realize it, or in maybe a piece of bread I may have eaten that should have been made with some milk. But I have made an absolute conscious effort not to eat anything from an animal.
Well, the thought is certainly there. But as a personality, as somebody who rubs elbows with the rich and famous across the country, don't they look upon you as rather strange?
They did, I think, in the 70s. And then in the 80s, people began to change, and nobody was laughing anymore. And they could understand when I began to talk to them why it was that I was doing what I was doing, and it made sense, particularly the health aspect. The ethical aspect they didn't always understand and seemed to always have a quote or two from the Bible or something that would tell them that was okay to do, and their conscience was eased. But for health reasons, they began to break through. And of course, today, when you speak to somebody, they feel that you've been on the cutting edge and that you have been a pioneer and that you were right all along.
That must make you feel good.
Yes, it does. It makes me feel good because I feel I've planted some seeds in the minds of some others, and many others have become vegetarian because I've sent them books, or because I've talked to them, or because they've learned a little bit more about it. And my 2 children, I have 4 children, a baby from my marriage with Jean Kasem, and I have 3 children from a first marriage, and they're all teenagers, and the 2 girls are vegetarian, and one of those girls is vegan.
For the same
and that
reason?
was on their own. It wasn't something that I had to force them to do, but just, I guess, setting an example was enough, and they feel much better for it. They would absolutely not eat an animal. They also are pioneers, and with their friends, they often talk about it, but nobody is laughing at them.
Well, that's great. Didn't you ever worry about the health of your children? I mean, here you know, as an entertainer and not a nutritionist or not a doctor, not familiar with the medical literature. I mean, you took a big step there, taking not only your own health, which, you know, people have no trouble abusing and changing all the time, but you took something very precious, and that's your children, and you allowed them to eat a diet that, it sounds to me, you weren't quite sure about nutritionally at one time.
That's true. As a matter of fact, I knew nothing about the nutrition before I spoke to Dr. Clapper. And that's when I began to really understand a little bit more about it. One of the things that I'm very careful to do, and that is, I know that I can get all of the protein and all the nutrition that I need in vegetables and in fruits and legumes, of course, and nuts. And so I do worry about the one thing, and I've decided finally on vitamin B12 to take that through the
nutritional yeast?
The little jar that I keep in my refrigerator.
Spirulina.
Nutritional yeast.
Nutritional yeast, sure.
Yes, and I do that. I spread it on my vegetable soup, or I put it on a potato once or twice a month.
Well, that's good. It takes you 20 to 30 years to run out of vitamin B12, so make sure you do this every day. Well, you know, yeah, I understand, you know, and as I see it, just as I'm understanding your discovery of better eating, realizing that there is a healthier way to eat, that you don't have to eat animals to get protein, you don't have to drink milk to get calcium. As a matter of fact, if you take that behavior, you risk your life. The last holdout, and we're going to hear more and more about it, the last holdout in this country among nutritionists, diehards who want to continue eating these animal products, is the issue of vitamin B12. And they're going to be bringing it up more and more, and of course you and myself and the rest of the people in the country need to know the whole issue behind this B12 thing, and that is that your risk of getting B12 deficiency is probably 1 in a million or less. And if you do get it, you get a mild reversible anemia, you get a nervous system problem rarely, which is reversible until late stages, and if you stopped eating all B12 today and you were going to be that 1 in a million person, it would take you 20 to 30 years to run out of your stores of B12. Now compare that with your risk of dying of heart disease, which is 1 in 2, and your risk of getting a major cancer, which is 1 in 3. I mean, there's just no comparison. So,
well, and what is so terrific today is the idea that as a vegetarian, you're not only making a contribution to the animals, but also to your health, but more importantly now, the safety of the planet. And I'm happy to say that I just finished narrating about a month ago the new book by Harvey Diamond called Your Heart, Your Planet.
yes.
Harvey and his wife Marilyn and I narrated that on tape. And also I did narration for Fit for Life with John Robbins on his book. And
Diet for a New America.
Yes, Diet for a New America.
Yes.
And I'm so happy that in some way now I've been able to use my voice as a spokesperson for vegetarianism, and I would hope that one day I could create either a television show or a radio show on the lines of what you do on television and radio to perpetuate this idea that we can help ourselves and our health, and of course do even more for the animals, and that is save their tortured lives, and then at the same time save our tortured earth.
Do you worry at all, or has it been a time that you've worried that your outspoken manner as far as issues of vegetarianism and the harm of eating meat, especially when it impacts industry so greatly, could cause you physical harm or harm in the industry?
Physical harm I've been concerned about in another area, but not necessarily in the area of my being a vegan. And I have been outspoken. I've done shows as long as 2 hours talking and even debating somebody from the meat industry, as unqualified as I am, but I speak from my heart, and I think that's the best way to speak anyway. And because of that, I know that there are probably people on Madison Avenue who are now very familiar with the things that I'm doing on radio and television, etc. Tomorrow I'll do a television show with Jesse Jackson, you know, the Jesse Jackson TV show?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, Jesse, for the first time, is going to do just a personal interview on his show without an audience of me and my wife, Jean.
Mm.
And 10 years ago, as a matter of fact, this coming Friday is the anniversary of the day that he married the two of us, or officiated at the wedding.
Oh.
And I am going to be trying to convince Jesse to become a vegetarian. And so I know that Madison Avenue and people who would be potential employers for commercials, and even people who would be potential sponsors for my radio and television shows, must know that I am a vegetarian and that I'm outspoken and that I don't believe people should be eating meat, fish, or poultry for many, many reasons, if not just the one basic reason, that is that if you eat the animal gets back at you by killing you, and does it to the tune of over 1 million people a year through through heart disease. So I just feel that that's much more important than whether I do another commercial or whether I get another sponsor for my radio show. And I know that in some way it may be selfish what I'm doing, because after all, my radio show involves not just me, but the network that carries it, etc. But I'm very fortunate. I have somebody who is the president of this network, Norm Pattis, of the Westwood One Radio Network, who understands the issues that I deal with, whether it's the issues of the Middle East or anti-smoking or anti-drug or being a vegetarian, and he says that's my prerogative, and I have that right as an American. So I have a good, I work for good people who understand that, and I can say that because of one of the issues that I've dealt with, there has been someone who canceled on a radio show, the network radio show. I won't tell you who the sponsor is because it would be surprising, but it has happened.
Well, do you ever censor who puts commercials on your show?
Do I ever what?
Do you ever censor? I mean, do you have somebody from the liquor industry or the beef industry wants to advertise on Casey's Top 40?
No, we don't have censors, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because one thing that I won't do is I won't do commercials for instance, I've turned down milk commercials, shoe commercials. Even though I'm not an ethical vegan, I still wear leather shoes. But I still have turned down a shoe store that wanted me to be their spokesperson on television on their commercials.
Right.
And also I've turned down on TV and voiceover commercials. I don't know, probably 30 or 40 possible sponsors, from fast foods to supermarket chains, national supermarket chain. They wanted me to be their spokesperson. And because I would have to eventually talk about meat or cheese or milk, I chose not to do it. So, but on the other hand, on my radio show, because I have that arm's length situation where I do not endorse, I do not say this hour is brought to you by Carnation Milk or whatever. I feel that I've positioned myself in such a way that there is no endorsement there, and so I certainly can't let the network go under and tell them that they can't sell spots to whomever, because that's not in my contract.
Sure.
And they would either get rid of me, or they would have to get rid of me because they would find it very difficult. But I can still be outspoken, and I have a feeling that because I don't do a hands-on sell, that I'm headed in the right direction, and I'm doing what I can for animals and for the earth and for my sense of ethics.
Well, certainly getting yourself off the national radio network is not going to serve animal rights or human health any better, because you will no longer be in a position to be a spokesman.
That's true. That's true. And if I thought there were a way that I could, and if I thought there were a way to circumvent that, I think probably I'd sacrifice a lot more than I'm sacrificing already.
Very good. This is Dr. John McDougall on KSRO Radio 1350, and my special guest is Casey Kasem of Casey's Top 40. And I'll be back with you in just a moment after this commercial break, which, by the way, will not be a commercial break for the dairy industry. This is Dr. John McDougall on KSRO Radio 1350, and I'm sure you're enjoying this interview as much as I am with Casey Kasem, finding out how one man has decided to try and make a difference in the area of human health and animal health. But I get the feeling, just from talking to you and the little bit I know about you, that really animal health came long before human health concern, didn't it?
It certainly did. Conscience told me there was something wrong with slaughtering animals, and told me early at the age of 15 that there was something wrong with this. But even going back further, when I was a child, and I do believe in reincarnation, when I was a child, I couldn't eat meat, and my mother insisted, because of course she listened to the dairy industry and everybody tell her doctor of course, that I had to have the basic four, and I would sit there for a long time, and I was late to school as many as 67 times in one semester because I just didn't like meat and I couldn't eat it. But of course, custom allowed me to learn to like it, and I eventually, up until the time I was 15, ate it and enjoyed it, and then I saw the steer slaughter.
Well, did you ever tell your mother that it was too hard to chew?
I don't know that I told her that. I told her that I just couldn't swallow it.
Uh-huh.
It didn't smell right. It didn't taste good. It felt that I didn't know as a child, of course. I probably didn't think twice where that that meat came from.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember as a kid myself, I didn't have the same kind of feelings you did, but I just remember telling my parents many, many times, I cannot chew this. And what they should have said to me, instead of saying, well, John, you have to chew it to get your protein, you have to eat that before you eat your vegetables, and that's what they said. What they should have said is, of course, John, you can't chew it. You have the wrong kind of teeth.
Right.
But that's not what they told me.
That's not what they told you, but I certainly have told that to my children.
I was also raised in the Detroit area.
I know that.
Oh, you do?
You were in Highland Park.
Well, Dearborn.
Oh, Dearborn, that's right.
And I went to Michigan State University, and before I got into medicine, I was a pre-vet student, and I took the classes of animal husbandry, and I had the displeasure also not of seeing just one cow slaughtered, but of going through a slaughterhouse and learning how to grade meat, and getting the whole procedure all the way from on the hoof and breathing to hanging up on a hook.
Oh.
And it was an interesting experience, I have to say. I didn't have all it takes at that time to come to the kind of conclusions that I could have come to, but it didn't feel good, and I didn't end up in veterinary medicine, and I think that's at least part of the reason.
Well, I believe, and I say this in interviews that I do on radio and television, that if in the 4th or 5th grade children could take a field trip to a slaughterhouse, we wouldn't have to worry about people becoming vegetarians. I mean, it would be just automatic. It would happen in a day. Those kids would get such an eyeful, and their teachers as well, that by the turn of the century, we'd have not 15 to 20 million vegetarians. We'd have a billion vegetarians all over the world.
It'd be socially disgusting to eat meat, just like
Yes.
it's socially disgusting to smoke cigarettes in public these
Yes.
days. I can see that, but unfortunately, you have children, I have children. They go to school, and what they're confronted with is the basic 4 food chart on their wall, which teaches them that the most important thing to eat is dairy products and meat products. Then they go to the school cafeteria, which is the dumping grounds for every bit of excess product from the meat and dairy industry that this country produces. And what chance do our kids have?
That's so true. And when their teachers, the people that they respect most, encourage them to eat that kind of food, and nobody is there to tell them that it's not necessary, and that they're eating food from tortured animals, and that they should be rebelling, and they should be calling attention to the fact that animals, it's one thing that they get killed and slaughtered. That's, for most of them, that's the best thing that could ever happen to them. But they lead tortured lives, and in protest against the animal industry, the animal agriculture industry, we have to stand up and let people know why it is that we don't eat cheese and we don't eat milk, aside from the fact that it's not healthy for you, how very unhealthy it is for those animals that have just become products. They're not beings anymore in the eyes of the people who produce them.
What are some of the more shocking things that you've discovered in the animal husbandry industry?
Oh, let's begin with the chickens. Put in those cages that are no bigger than a folded newspaper, and chickens have pride and a pecking order, and when you consider that they're in there, some of them without beaks, some of them with beaks. Those that have beaks, of course, cannibalize the others because they need room to move. They can't even move their wings, and of course their feet get entangled in the wire. And then there's one metal cage, wire cage, set upon another and another and another and another, and the feces falls on top of the heads of these creatures. Then, as they're born, and they happen to be born a male chicken, they're thrown into a plastic bag, and they suffer, and not suffer, but they suffocate in the bodies of their brothers. And then the female chickens automatically their beaks are put into a metal machine that cuts the beak off, and some of those don't survive that. And they're made to create eggs, and then ultimately become food for animals, I guess, if not human beings. That's just the chickens. Then you have the pigs. The pigs are stored very often the same way, in concrete buildings that are warehouse size, and then in order to keep the floors of the building clean, they use ammonia. Well, we know that pigs are much more sensitive in smell than humans are. And could you imagine living your entire life smelling ammonia day in and day out in a darkened room? Children don't know that those pigs don't get out and play in the mud, but those pigs are just products and treated like inanimate products. So they lead tortured lives and look forward to dying, of course. And then you have the calves in their 2x4 prisons, where they have no opportunity ever to feed on their mother's breast. The animal is immediately taken from the mother, and the calf is put into this little stall and not allowed to suck on anything, but just fed milk, so that the price for their bodies can be a lot higher as they sell milk-fed veal to customers at restaurants that come from these calves. And the mother, the cow, never seeing their offspring, but being artificially inseminated again and again and again, so that their udders will be full because they're impregnated, and that means more milk for the dairyman. Their udders so big that they're just not hanging, but literally on the floor. And they, too, hardly ever see the sun or the grass or graze. This is, and it goes on and on and on for all kinds of animals, not to mention the ones that are being experimented upon. So this is my priority, and I feel that if I do nothing else in life but can turn a few people around, I can do a lot to help the animals in their tortured lives.
You know, they do a lot to disguise the story that you're telling people about. You know, they don't call it eating a cow, they call it eating beef or a steak.
Right.
If people, just hypothetically, people were required to kill their own animal, to dress it, they were required to eat the animal, or eat the animal without any cover-up, the ketchup, the A1 steak sauce, the heavy salt, and so on, I bet you'd just get a lot of people to change right then and there.
No question about it.
If you had a little more direct
I can't put a worm on a... when I was a child, that was another thing that bothered me, and that was when I'd go fishing with an uncle or a relative that loved fishing. I couldn't see how they could take that worm and put it on a hook. That just seemed like the most terrible thing you could do to something that was living and moving.
Yep. There are even people, and I know that it's going to be real hard for folks to relate to, because it is a little hard for me to relate to this one, but I've had people on this show like Neil Bernard, the Dr. Bernard,
yes,
who is concerned even to the point of the way honeybees are treated. And I don't know, I mean, do we get that far as concern for other animals?
I think what we have to do is take the first step in a journey of 1,000 miles. And unless we take that first step, then we'll never accomplish anything. If we become the kind of people who say, well, I'm not going to vote because my vote doesn't count, then certainly your vote won't count, and certainly the world will not change, and certainly things will not get better. So we have to begin somewhere. And I think even people who might be listening to us now, Doctor, who are a little bit revolted by some of the things that I may have said about the animals, because it is not a pretty picture.
Hopefully they've heard it before.
Hopefully they have, and they're saying, you know, maybe I can just stop eating meat. And maybe I can just back off eating meat, fish, and poultry by 10 or 25%. Well, what can happen if you stop eating meat and you're a Californian? You will save between 2,000 and 2,500 gallons of water a day for the state. 85% of the water in the state of California is used by the animal agriculture industry. If the people in California were to back off by just 10%, do you see how much water we could save? We would never have a shortage of water here in the
I can
state.
take that brick out of my toilet?
Pardon me?
I can take that brick out of my toilet?
You can take showers for as long as you want. You can forget about brushing your teeth and having to worry about leaving the water on. You'll be saving so much water that we'll have more than we need in this state, and we can help some of our neighboring states with water if we just backed off by 25% on eating meat alone.
Let's see, I never hear that as a recommendation. They're telling me how to save a few ounces of water with the recommendations that we just mentioned, and yet you're talking about saving thousands of gallons of water a day
Exactly.
just by changing our dietary habits. Why don't they have that commercial?
I haven't
on
seen
television.
that one, and I haven't seen this one. The fact, for instance, that that it takes to create one steer from the beginning of life to the end of that steer's life enough water to float a destroyer. Enough water.
Yeah.
Is that unbelievable? And it takes.
And that's a short life, too. I mean, these steers are slaughtered at just a little over a year, aren't they?
That's right. And when you consider how little water it takes to raise a pound of grain, it's just enormous. It's 2,500 gallons of water for a pound of meat. It's 25 gallons of water for a pound of grain.
Hmm.
There's the difference. And we are now thinking about rationing water here in California, certainly in Southern California, because there's a shortage.
How do you answer people who say, okay, you got a point, but look, I'm a beef farmer. I'm a dairy farmer. You're ruining my business. You're destroying my family. How can you do that in good conscience just for a few cows and a few chickens?
Well, I would say that people who are in that situation, I think a lot rests on their conscience, and I think they're already suffering. And my heart goes out to them. I'd like to think that as I grow older, I'm becoming a more forgiving person of myself and of people around me. And I would just suggest that they learn as much as they can about what is happening to animal life here in this country, what it's doing to the ecology, what it's doing to the health of people. And if they can still circumvent their conscience after learning about it, well, then maybe it's just going to take more time. And I know that they're put in a position where it will mean hitting their pocketbook should they leave that industry. But if they can find a way to find something parallel to do that doesn't kill animals, that doesn't torture animals, or if they can even become more humane in the way they treat their animals, in the way they deliver them to a slaughterhouse, in the way they treat them. Some in factory farms, of course, we're talking about an industry that's corporate and international. But you're talking about the small farmer. At least they can have the joy of knowing that if they do have animals, at least their lives are not tortured. So I would hope that the small dairy farmer, I would hope that those that have anything to do with animals, sentient beings that ultimately go to the slaughterhouse for people to eat, would at least consider a beginning. And then ultimately, maybe because of that, their children might choose another profession.
Well,
or not profession, but another type of work.
They could also learn from the tobacco industry, too. I mean, after all, those folks have become a condemned industry, at least as far as scientific evidence and government policy and national policy are concerned, and so they have made adjustments in the tobacco industry, and when we get the same kind of warnings on beef that we have on cigarettes, I'm sure the people in both in the beef industry and the dairy industry will adjust just like the people in the tobacco industry have.
I would think so. I would hope so. I just think that Americans who unfortunately grow up watching television, motion pictures, day in and day out, video cassettes now, where there is so much slaughter of human beings, I would hope that they would recognize that if we can go back to the very basic thing, and that is not to want to bring death to anything that has eyes that it can run away from you, and realize that is basically right and should be just core in our thinking, that could be the beginning of really a new world order ultimately, because as long as we keep killing animals, I have a feeling we're going to keep killing people. And there's certainly a relationship there.
Well, certainly when you start killing, it's hard to stop. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that it becomes a habit, and as I said earlier in the program, quoting George Bernard Shaw, custom will reconcile people to any atrocity.
This is Dr. John McDougall on KSRO Radio 1350, and my very interesting, very moving guest is Kasem. We'll take a commercial break here, and I'll be back with you in just a moment. This is Dr. John McDougall on KSRO Radio 1350, and you're listening to Kasem, who has some very distinct views, very well thought out views on the issues of animals and how we should eat, and from a little different point of view than you hear me talk about on this show quite often. This is from a point of view that many people have become vegetarians. As a matter of fact, I would have to say that your point of view, Kasem, is a much more moving point of view for people than my point of view, and I'll tell you why I say that. My point of view being primarily human health, saving your spouse, your children, yourself from death at the dinner table. Your point of view being saving the animals. What I learned from the people at Farm a long time ago, Farm Animal Reform Movement, was when they were a vegetarian group interested in helping people, they got very few contributions. Nobody sent them any money. They weren't interested. And then they turned around and they changed their philosophy. I mean, they probably already had this philosophy, but they changed their emphasis of their organization to protecting farm animals, and they could hardly have time to count the money and the contributions.
Well,
so I think you're probably the one who's going to really make the difference out here, because you're dealing with something people really do care about, which is animals, and somehow they don't show the same concern for themselves, and that always surprises me, but I think there's a lot of truth in that. Being in the position you're in, every week you get to talk to millions of impressionable minds across the country, people right on the cutting edge of music. It just must be real hard for you to sit behind that mic and not say the things that you've said today.
Well, in a way I do. Let me see if I can carry this thought through to its completion here. If I can, as a broadcaster, be a good broadcaster, set an example for other broadcasters, be sort of a role model for young people who are coming on who want to be disc jockeys and whatever, people in the industry, and give them positive thoughts, which is what I try to do on my radio show for 4 hours once a week. And in that show, every now and then remind them that there is such a thing as a vegetarian, and that Madonna is a vegetarian, and so is Michael Jackson, and so is, and I can mention another 30 or 40 people in the record business who are vegetarians. And every now and then I will bring that up. And I won't hit them on the head with it, but I'll remind them that Madonna is also very concerned about her health, and that's why she eats the way she does and why she does some exercise, and talk also about Michael Jackson and his treatment of animals and how much he loves animals, and so on. I think I'm becoming a force for good. But what is key is that while I'm on the air and would love very much to do what you do, week after week, and that is to help people help themselves and use your whole program as a force for good. I think that as long as I can maintain some sort of credibility because of what I do in a positive fashion on my radio show, then outside of my radio show, when I do interviews such as the one I'm doing with you now, Doctor, then people will more likely stay tuned and listen with both ears. So my purpose in doing the show, the best way I know how, in a positive way, always, I think lends to my credibility and ultimately can affect people because of what I tell them, because that they have a confidence in what it is that I say.
Okay, you told me, I think a few minutes ago, that what you really enjoy doing, where you really are at your best, is when you talk on these issues that are so dear to your heart. If you had an opportunity to do anything you wanted, you had the freedom, you had the money, you had the time, you had everything you wanted to do, what you really wanted to do as far as a radio or television show or a method to get this message out to people, have you thought about what you'd like to do?
Yes, as a matter of fact, let me think now. If I had all of the resources that you're talking about,
everything, anything you want, it's just, right
then
there.
I would get to the schools in some way. I would do whatever it is that I could do to make television shows that young people could see, movies that young people could see, that would begin them to introduce them to something that will activate their conscience, and make them realize that those animals have just as much right to this earth as we do, and that there's something evil and disgusting and obscene about using your body as a burial ground for animals.
Have you thought about doing a documentary?
Well, I know this, that there are a few pretty good ones around that have been on PBS occasionally. Occasionally one will get on. I've thought about doing, and I think I mentioned this to you when we first talked, about doing an infomercial. An infomercial are those half-hour shows that you may have seen with Tony Robbins, who talks about how you can improve your motivation, how you can be a better achiever, etc. And then they sell you something at the end of it, and it's usually a package of tapes, very much like the wonderful tapes that you have that are available for sale, about good health and about nutrition and about vegetarianism. And if we could put together people like yourself and John Robbins and Dr. Clapper and others, a group of people, and put this 30-minute show on the air, asking people to buy something so it could perpetuate keeping the show on the air, and I would not want any profit from that whatsoever. That's something that I've been contemplating and trying to figure out how to do in the best way. But I understand, let's say, I think it was yesterday I was speaking to Dr. Clapper, and he said, I think you and he and John Robbins have just done a show for television.
We did a PBS show.
A PBS show.
Right, it'll play sometime this spring it's going to play, and if it's picked up outside of the LA market, which is where it was produced, then it could be a national PBS show. And half of it is on the clinic that I run, and half of it is on the social issues that you're talking about.
That is just terrific. I think that's going to be a major breakthrough.
Well,
I'm so excited, and when he told me that, I heard there was something in the works, but I didn't realize that it was already finished and on its way to being aired.
Well, you and I, from this moment on, start planning a national radio show or a national TV show, and let's not just get them once. Let's get them every week, 52 weeks out of the year. How does that sound?
Well, I think that there's a seed of an idea there that I planted in my brain, and I know you have for many, many years, and thinking how best to do it so it has the kind of impact that we know television can have and radio can have if we do it the right way.
Well,
and I'm all for that, and I know that the day will come when you and I and others who are as concerned will in some way do it on a national basis, and whether it's a telethon once a year or whether it's a weekly show or a daily show, or I know that you're doing also and have done daily TV shows, am I right?
They play once a week, yes, nationally.
Once a week, do they?
Yes. In fact, I'm going to send you a whole tape of those on a new video I just produced.
Oh, I'd like to see that.
You'll get it in the mail before Christmas.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, I want to thank you very much. This has been a fascinating hour, and I think we've got a lot of people listening, and maybe we'll do it again sometime if you would agree.
I would be happy.
And we'll just, it takes repeated exposures is what it takes.
It really does, because people, and I know myself when I listen to your tapes, I don't hear everything the first time. I have to go back and listen again, and as I get older, I acquire more brain cells, I don't lose them, and all of a sudden I begin to hear things that I didn't hear. So sometimes we have to be told again and again what's good for us.
Well, that getting older is the secret. We got to outlast those other buggers.
We'll do it.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
That was great.
Well, thank you. Need to do to really get this whole country thinking about nutrition and ecology and about those animals. And I'm not sure how to mount that kind of show yet. I'm not sure if it's just a talk show or I don't know yet. I know that what you're doing is probably being repeated in other areas with other people who are as concerned. But we certainly do need a national show, don't we?
Well, I've got a lot of thoughts on it. I was actually going to call you last week when I was in L.A., but the filming got a little bit crazy.
Sure.
But I've got some real good ideas, and as a matter of fact, we are in the process right now of putting together a half-an-hour television show which is going to deal with all these issues. And when I say we're in the process of it, the producer, director, and organizational staff from the Lifestyle Magazine show are working right now to put together a half-an-hour show, which is going to have a segment on, well, as a matter of fact, when you see the video, you'll see sort of what we're going to do. We'll do interviews with people. We'll do location shots. There will be discussions on various subjects. A lot of interesting things in a half-an-hour format. And what we need right now is we need to find out how to get the network's attention, and we need to have the financial sources for this show. So when I send you this tape, if you can look at it from that point of view, that what I'd like to do is similar type of work on a half-an-hour national show. And if you've got any people that could be contacted or be of any help, I'd certainly appreciate any information you have.
Let me tell you what I think the key would be. To get it on nationally, to get it on a Sunday morning.
Yes.
And that is to have stars on the show.
Okay.
If you were to able to get on a once-a-week basis a featured guest star, a Michael Jackson, a Madonna, this is asking for people who might do it.
Yes.
Because of what it is, and would turn down $100,000 if it were an appearance just to talk about music.
Right.
But to talk about something that they believe in, that's bigger than their careers, that is the key. And I think there is the answer. And that is to bring people together in a special or in a weekly show where you can have somebody from the group Boston or somebody like Sting or, talking about ecological things tied in with vegetarianism.
They would do it, wouldn't they?
I think that there's a possibility they would do it. I would like to think that the time is coming when we come up with the right kind of format and that we would appeal to them. And I think if it were a network show, a national network show, I think possibly they might jump to it. And I think probably the first network that might go for that, my guess is the, aside from the health network that you're on, is CNN.
CNN might?
I think CNN
How about Fox?
Would possibly do a half-hour show at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning on something like this. They may lose a lot of sponsors, or they may be threatened, but I think with Turner you have somebody who's
he's bigger than money, isn't he?
Who's his own boss.
Yeah.
And I don't think that would bother him at all.
Well, I'm working hard at it because the only way that this is going to happen is to get that kind of a show on the air, and you can sure change a lot of minds very quickly.
Yes.
How are things going with you and your family? You got the eating and the...
Our little baby is doing well.
Good.
She's 6 months old. I was very concerned about what we were giving her as
formula.
Initially, the formula.
Yeah.
And I noticed Dr. Clapper in the last issue of Vegetarian Times answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel reasonably good about what we did. Her mother now has her on Similac.
Similac
because she was concerned
about the aluminum.
About the aluminum.
I think either decision, as I wrote you, is an okay decision.
Right.
I think it's one that you're going to not have any problems with at all.
Right. I feel that way too.
Yeah.
And I know we'll raise her to be a vegan ultimately, and or at least she'll choose to be.
At 6 months of age, they should get potatoes and rice and fruits and those types of things at about 6 months. You can start. You don't have to, but you can start adding those things to the diet.
Good.
And my kids, I've got a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old, and an 8-year-old who have been raised this way. So we have a lot of experience behind it, and they choose to eat this kind of diet because they don't know anything different. I mean, they've gone through rebellious phases where they've had hamburgers. They'll take about 2 bites, just to be socially acceptable, and they won't be able to finish it. And now they're at a stage, at least the 15 and 16-year-old are, where that type of a thing is not socially acceptable to eat meat, or their friends come up to them and want to know about the kind of diet they eat. So they go through different kinds of phases, and just kind of got to sit back and watch what happens to them.
Well, I think possibly in our lifetimes, if we continue doing what we're doing, I think that we're going to begin to feel what it is that we see now, or we're going to see what it is that we see now when people walk into a room. They're going to be asking, can I light up? or not even ask the question because they know it'll be embarrassing. I think the day is going to come when we see occasionally that situation where people are going to be uncomfortable ordering beef.
Oh, yes.
Particularly beef. As a matter of fact, now when I go out and without making it known that I'm a vegetarian, and I go to a lot of dinners that are charity affairs,
Sure.
I will sit there and order my plate of vegetables or fruit, and people will feel guilty eating what they're eating.
Oh, yes. Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know. And then if they see you order first, they just say, "I'll take the same thing Casey has."
That's right. And 20 years ago, they'd have said, "Oh, if there's one of those crazy nuts."
Yeah.
You know, isn't that something?
Oh, yeah. Things are changing, and it's exciting to see it change. If in your travels around, if you find people who are interested in the things that I do, you just let Jan know at the office, and we'll send them tapes, videotapes,
Thank you.
books, anything, as long as they would be appreciated. You
Of
know,
course.
the sad thing about sending things to people that are not requested is they often end up in the trash basket, and that's probably worse
Sure.
than sending it to them. But it'd be an opportunity for me, as I've told you before, and I'm sure you realize, to have an influence on these folks and let them know what I'm doing, because they could help me, they could help get the message out, they could help everybody. They got great visibility.
Well, I know that you're doing miraculous things, and the more I learn about it, the more I'll be able to network.
If you're up in the area, it'd be a great privilege for me to get together with you to show you the clinic that I run at St. Lena Hospital and Health Center, show you the things that I do with people. As a matter of fact, if you ever had the opportunity to come by for lunch, dinner at the program and meet the folks, particularly during the second week. During the first week of the program, particularly during the first 2 or 3 days, they hate the food and they hate being there. But by the second week of the program, they think they ought to go out and they ought to sell this program to the rest of the world, because they're off all their medicine. They love the food. They feel better than they've felt in 20 or 30 years. To have you see that in those folks, in the second week of the program, I think it would make a really lasting impression on you to watch people go from sickly carnivores to very, very healthy vegetarians. It's a pure vegan, no oil diet that they're fed.
Right.
Oh yeah, and this is in a hospital setting. I have great discussions and great controversies with the bypass surgeons and some of the other staff there, but they're controversies and discussions that I just kind of let them grow in a sense, and because my basis is so strong, they'd never stand a chance. But they get a little upset with me because of my stand on bypass surgery, and it supports 80% of the hospital. We're in the Napa Valley, where the wine industry contributes hundreds of thousands of dollars to an Adventist hospital, and they want me to promote alcohol. The hospital does, and these are Adventists. I don't know if you know about them.
Sure. Well, the Adventists are the vegetarians.
Vegetarians, and drinking is one of the greatest taboos in the Adventist religion. Yet, because they get hundreds of thousands of dollars, they're mad at me because I won't stand up and say drinking wine is good for people.
Oh my goodness.
So there are all kinds of interesting political things that are going on there, but it just seems every day, I win a little bit more, a little bigger battle, and so on. And I see a lot of progress on the areas that I'm trying to make change in. It's exciting, and like I say, if you're up in the Bay Area, it'd be great to show you what I do and to get to know you a little bit better. I'm going to be in Los Angeles April 27th to do the dental convention.
Yes.
The National Dental Convention. I spoke at the regional one last.
The dental convention.
The National Dental Convention in Anaheim.
And why would and you'll be speaking to the dentist
to the
because
dentist.
of
5,000 dentists.
Is that right?
Yeah, I spoke to the California Dental Association. I spoke to them about 6 months ago, and I had a non-credit class. They won't give me credit for what I teach because I'm a doctor, not a dentist. And I had standing room only in an auditorium that held about 500 people. And they were so impressed that 2 days later, the National called me up and asked me if I'd be a speaker. And so April 27th, I speak. It's a Saturday in Anaheim at, I believe, the Hilton Hotel to 5,000 dentists. Now, I don't know, not that all of them will show up to my presentation, but there'll be 5,000 dentists from across the country there. I get invited to some pretty good talks around the country, but this will be a fun one. Influence a lot of very important people.
That and by the way, I don't know if you saw the latest thing on 60 Minutes with regard to the fillings in your teeth.
No, did they do one on mercury?
Yes.
Oh, well.
Do you feel that strongly about it?
Well, I don't know what they said. I wrote a piece in one of my sections in Vegetarian Times about 3 years ago about how the mercury fillings should never be put in the mouth.
Right.
Ever again. But you shouldn't have them removed.
Is that right?
No, because if you have them removed, what happens is you release a tremendous amount of mercury into your system in the process of drilling them out. More than you'd ever. Pardon me?
Because I have nine areas that would need inlays.
No, don't do it. If they fall out or they become, they have to be replaced, then to get them replaced with porcelain or plastic or gold.
Yes.
But don't have them drilled out because you'll release tremendous amounts of mercury into your system.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, as it is now, you feel that all the mercury that is going to have been that would have been released in my system has already been done?
Well, that, or if you take a look at it, it's over the next 30 years, the amount of mercury that will be released into your system by, chewing is going to be much, much less than the amount of mercury that would be released in your system if you had them removed.
Well, how would that happen if you remove the...
Well, because they have to go in and drill. You see, when they take the mercury filling out, they just don't go in and pop it out.
Right.
They have to drill it out, and in the process of drilling, they turn the mercury into mercury vapor, which you swallow and inhale.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So you will release more mercury and absorb more mercury into your system by having those fillings drilled out.
Now, why didn't they just say that on...
I don't know. I didn't see the show.
Could I make a suggestion? I think if you were to write to 60 Minutes
yes.
and say that, you would be doing a tremendous public service, because I know that look how quickly I jumped to it. I went to the doctor the next day and said, I'm taking these out.
Yes.
And I think that you'd be doing a real public service
okay.
to tell people that.
All right, I'll try and do that. I'll have to. I just wonder if I'll get there on time.
Oh yes, you will, because it was. They'll still be doing letters for 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
They don't do it just from week to week.
Mm-hmm.
And this only happened last Sunday.
Okay.
So if you were to just send a paragraph.
Okay.
As as an expert.
You don't happen to know their address, do you?
Let's see, 60 Minutes. I think 60 Minutes. Let's see. I have I have CBS. CBS, I think, is on 57th Street in New York City. If you just send it to 60 Minutes,
mm-hmm.
care of CBS
right.
Television,
mm-hmm.
57th Street, New York City.
Okay.
I'm sure you'll get through. And if you needed an address.
Mm-hmm. I can always call them.
You could always call them, but I think it would. I guarantee you
yeah.
that they might even get in touch with you.
Okay, I'll send them, and what I'll do is, along with the video I'm going to send you today, you must not have all the vegetarian articles that I've written over the last 5 years. I've written for them for 5 years now, and I'll enclose.
I've got many of them that I may not have read. I keep most of my book, but
well,
if
I don't
you
know
have
how
some, that'd be fine.
I don't know how much of my stuff I should dump on you. I probably
I'm sitting looking at 5 books right now, McDougall's Medicines, the
yeah.
McDougall Program, etc. I wish I could absorb them as quickly as I want to.
Well, I got a bunch of newsletters. I've got a lot of Vegetarian Times articles, and what I'll do is I'll just pull a bunch of that material and send it along with the video, and I'll put on top the one about fillings that I wrote.
Well, very good, and I'll hold off on that. I won't do that.
No, I wouldn't do it. And like today, I have to go get a filling replaced. In fact, I've got to be there in about 10 minutes, and I'll have them replace it with porcelain. But I would never have them drill all my silver out.
Okay.
No, I don't want to do that.
Anytime. So you have the silver in your mouth as well.
Oh, sure.
I've got tons of it, but
yeah.
And I haven't. I don't feel. See, they pointed out in the show
yeah.
that some people who have arthritis or some
yeah.
people who have certain problems that they've experienced through the years,
yeah.
once they take it out, the problem is eliminated.
Well, I'm skeptical.
Are you?
Yeah, I think mercury poisoning is a real issue, but I don't think it causes those things. I think what those people are suffering from is the effects of the all-American diet.
Oh, yes.
And so what we need to do is, and I feel a little bad about that, because then the mercury fillings provide a scapegoat. Now, I don't have to change my diet. All I have to do is go to the dentist and have my fillings changed.
Right.
And people like quick fixes. They like easy ways to get things done, and to have your teeth changed. It not only gets things done quick and easy, but it also gives you the suffering and pain you need to feel good.
Right. Right.
That's people,
Well, I'm glad I spoke with you about that today.
Yeah, listen, anytime you or your wife or family have a medical question, That's my business, and I love to take calls. I take 10 calls a day from people all over the country, and to be involved in your health care. I'd be glad to pass on my opinion for you and your friends and family anytime. Whether you follow it or not, it's a whole different issue, but I'd be glad to tell you what I think.
Well, thank you, and I hope if you come down, before April,
Yes.
and let me know, perhaps we can have breakfast or lunch or even dinner.
Well, if you have the time, certainly I will make the time.
Well, I certainly will too.
And I'll be down there April 27th, and I'll give you a call before I come down. Are you near Anaheim at all?
Not too far away. That's actually my birthday, but it'll be during the day, won't it?
We will be not only the 27th. Let's see, the 27th, is that a Friday or a Saturday this year?
I'm not sure.
Well, I'll be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Okay. Well,
I'll be there all 3 days, and Saturday's the day I talk, whether that's the 27th or 28th. And I'll give you a call, and if any of those 3 days you've got some time, how about taking? Oh, your little one's too young to go to Disneyland, isn't he?
Right. She'll only be about 8-9 months. Well, maybe a year old.
Well, next year you'll spend a lot of time at Disneyland. This will be our last time, Casey.
Pardon me?
This will be our last time to Disneyland. That's the way we're looking at it. The last time the family will go to Disneyland. I mean, when you have 15, 16-year-olds, you well know.
That's right.
That's it. They take the car and they're gone.
That's right.
So I'm at that age and stage now. So this is the whole family's going down, and I'm sure it'll be the last trip the whole family takes to Disneyland. So it's going to be fun.
Yes, that will be nice.
But we'll get together soon, and
Good.
I hope you enjoy this video, because I think you'll recognize a lot of things that can be done on a national basis when you look at it. It's a fun video. Lots of great interviews with really important people.
Excellent. I will definitely watch it and get back to you.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Can I get the names of your children again? I may have them written down in my.
I'll tell you what they told me this morning. I wasn't going to tell you this. They said, try and get Casey to send us his old records every week.
Every week will be tough.
Every week.
But every now and then I could do it.
Well, anytime you can. You've got 3 fans that can. My little 8-year-old sits and plays your albums all day long. I just couldn't believe it. I didn't see why. I brought these things home, and I thought they were going to say, "Oh, who's Casey Kasem? We're going to throw this in the trash." All the time they're playing.
Well, you know what I'll try to do is get them the year-end countdown.
Yeah.
And that's the top 100 hits of the year.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and that's a big, I think, 8-record collection.
Well,
that way they could hear all of the biggest hits of the year.
They would be thrilled. Absolutely thrilled.
And what are their names again?
There's Heather.
Yes.
Patrick. And Craig.
Craig. C-R-A-I-G?
Do you have my address?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Let me take yours down again so I don't have to look it up.
Okay, it's 138 North Mapleton Drive, Mapleton, LA 90077.
Okay, good. Now I'll get that tape into the mail to you today, and have a nice holiday.
Well, thank you so much, and if there's any way I can get a copy, a cassette of what we did.
Oh, well, you got that too.
Great.
All right.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye-bye.
Bye.